of psychotherapy, people tell me like, oh, we like psychotherapy because, psychotherapists soothes us and tells us, helps us to overcome our guilt. Like we in America, we suffer from guilt and we want to get away with guilt. Well, you suffer from guilt because you're guilty. How are you going to face it? Yes. Who next? Oh, she's next. Okay, sorry.
How do you try to...
To speak up with the question.
I've lost my voice.
Oh, I'm sorry. Or use the mic or...
Sorry. You're tired.
How do you try to respond to a child when they're asking why and what is that and what does it do and how does it work? How do you try to encourage that child to learn through experience rather than just saying it's a car and it transports people and,
Yep, excellent question. Well, again, I can speak for myself. And how I respond, I usually, more like a simple thing like a car that I have obviously my own knowledge of. Well, I would, like, regardless of her age, I would share with her all of which I'm aware of the ramifications of having a car. So for example, okay, a car is a vehicle that takes us somewhere. We hitchhiked a lot when she was a kid, and she learned her math by counting the cars that picked us up or didn't pick us up. But after that, when we moved to Quebec, I think she was 5, and at the library we saw a textbook. She was looking through it, and it said, well, it was on development, and okay, it was actually a school textbook, and it said developed nations have, and it showed statistics, have so much money per capita, so many cars per capita, and developing have so few. But by using this language, obviously what was implied is that the developing will one day develop and have, guess what, as many cars as we do. Hey! So that was an excellent topic for us to discuss. Well, what are cars, like what is technology, what is industrialism, what is this language developing towards what? Towards alienation. And it's amazing, kids, the younger they are, the more theory and concepts they can take in. My university students, when they ask me like, oh, in our work you want us to be geniuses, you want every essay to be like, it's just like, no. I want you to be like my 8 or 9 year old unschooled child. If you can be on that level, I'll be really happy you get an A+. Her political debate, we don't have television. In Canada we had last year political debates. Her 9-year-old friend would come and give me the whole summary. I didn't need anything more than that. It's like, this candidate was da-da-da-da-da, and he was bluffing on that. And that candidate was da-da-da-da-da, and of course it was nonsense. I'm like, okay, thank you, now I know. But the more education people get, the more alienation they have from understanding real concepts. So how you talk to kids, most of the time I talk to her, but I always tell her that I don't know everything. This is my struggle, this is how I see. Now, how you respond, and there's like lots to go and find out. Go and check out what the Indians thought of mathematics. We were coming to Memphis, listening to Martin Luther King. She was crying. How could they do that? Like, she listened, and my university students didn't want to they didn't even bother to listen to the talk when I gave it in my class, my 20th century American literature class. It was like, we thought we were going to take a literature class. well, not all of them, luckily, but you know, some of them really disdain. Oh, you're giving us Indian literature. Oh, you know, so because we thought it was 20th century American literature, why are you giving us Indian literature? Some of them didn't even know what, you know, which Indians we're talking about. So you see, like, children can take much more, but when you're humble in acknowledging that you are limited and you don't know, and just send them out into the world, they feel for the world, they learn so much more. Like, they know their different positions in life, different ways of knowing the world. And every person's experience is ultimately going to be different. Like, nobody is the same. Ethnically, gender-wise, nobody is the same. Like here, and especially in America, like, you know, the categories are insane. You know, this or that, man, woman, straight, gay, child, old. It's like all these separations. In the, like, even in the so-called fundamentalist, you know, Middle East, people are more accepting. You go to Yemen and people don't care. Like, okay, you know, you look this way. In India, people are more flexible about that. Well, it doesn't mean they're not domesticated. Actually, domestication, agriculture came from there. But even, you know, there is more leniency than what has become in Europe and North America. So I hope that answers your question.
Would you hesitate to teach your children to be multilingual, even though you would be imposing that knowledge on them, even though it would give them tools to be able to relate to more people?
That's a tricky question because we live in Quebec right now. French language is imposed. And I'm supposed to tell everybody every day that I'm teaching my kid French. And she feels it like she was a year and a few months when we went to Quebec, and she felt it and she didn't want to learn French. And I didn't want to impose it. And I don't believe, again, I don't believe that it's the only way of communication. Because the most profound experiences I've had with communicating were actually two really profound, and even a third quite interesting. And they all happened in contexts where I didn't speak the language. One was in Kenya, and I was in a village in near Mombasa. It was outside, like, it was a coconut plantation. I was visiting coffee plantations, and then I went and stayed with people on a coconut plantation. It was incredible. Coffee plantations like Jimmy Carter. I was like, wow, Jimmy Carter, the Queen of England. He comes there like, I don't know, a matriarch. Owns all these plantations. They live in incredible conditions. Like, you would think that in Kenya, in their land, the whole land is taken for plantation. And they live like in a high rise, like on top of each other in these little huts, and so little. And I had the most profound experience communicating with the locals there when they didn't speak my languages and I didn't speak their language. A second time happened in Hokkaido in Japan. Exactly the same thing, where we communicated so well and none of us spoke the language of the other. So, you know, like I said, my own memories I happened to have been, I have acquired before I started speaking. So kids will learn anyways. And they'll, unfortunately or fortunately, I mean, I don't know, they pick up languages. In Quebec, I have to remind her every now and then that, well, at least say bonjour when we cross the border. But she decided she wants to learn Spanish instead.
I just wanted to make a comment too about our conditioning that we have to have children in the hospital and that we have to make them sleep in a separate bed in a separate room, which is so frightening and is so abnormal. Animals, none of them do that, and in the early countries, which we call developing, they don't do that. They sleep with their children, and so that you're with them and they feel your heartbeat and you can hear them if they're upset. They're not somewhere else because we think we have to train them to be independent when they're a month old.
Absolutely, and that actually reminds me of another point I should bring. Absolutely, like, well, that's the first training of alienation, because, well, how are you going to have compassionate human being when this human being has been abandoned to it, like, you know, in Bentham's words, to its suffering, to its lot, from the first days when this being is so fragile and the time it needs us most. That is that's the first example of apathy. And another point that you reminded me of is hygiene. Like all this fuss about, oh, you know, like the dirty third world, and, you know, cleaning up and killing the germs, killing the rats, killing everyone, everything.
No killing rats.
And yet we're the only species who teach our children to poop on themselves. Teach the Pampers, that's what it is. It's okay, and kids scream. They don't like to do this because from the beginning, and Nikitina, the one who interviewed Arshavsky and Mukhtomsky, wrote so much on how by tuning into your child, you understand the child's needs. You show the children don't like to soil themselves. Kittens from the beginning are shown by their mother, okay, you know, it's okay, you do it there. You cover it up. We put Pampers, kids cry, they stay in Pampers for years until they're, like, that's it, you know. It becomes their flesh. And after that we tell them, it's wrong, you're dirty, you have to learn hygiene. Like, so many contradictions, actually, like, so many substitutions in this whole knowledge thing. Knowledge that we have, with which we have fallen from grace, is apathy, is ignorance. Hygiene is actually pooping on ourselves for years of our lives. And then, no wonder Freud got really hooked up on that. So.
Okay, you've been raising your hand for a while too, and then is there someone back here? Okay, so you're after this person. Oh, okay. Yeah. And then I'll get you two.
You need a microphone?
No.
I'm really intrigued by this, by the idea of communicating without words. I mean, I don't think we do enough of that, or try experience communication, other kinds of communication. I also wonder about things I've been hearing about language. I'm really new at this, so, but are we sure that that language has to go with alienation and with agriculture specifically? Like, is it possible that naming something is a desire for connection, or longing to make a connection and not necessarily to control or to distance oneself? I'm thinking of the beginning of one of the first creation myths, or the biblical story there in the beginning of Genesis, when the human being names things, and the Hebrew right is calling to, right, like calling to the different creatures. That just makes me wonder, like, calling out to this other being that is beautiful, and you're watching it move, and it's not like you, and you're intrigued, you know, this thing that has a different kind of hair and different ways of walking and whatever. So I just wonder, is it possible that words or naming or language can be something other than exploiting or distancing?
Well, you know, I don't have a definite, like, you know, again, I can share only my interpretation of things and my observation. I would have liked, and maybe, you know, if you would have asked me, say, 10 years ago the same question, I would have maybe been more optimistic. But apart from the official studies in psycholinguistics that show that even in the closest families, the maximum, like you know, your twins, the maximum of success in communication, that is what is being transmitted and understood, apparently it seems like it's 80%. So, you know, where do others fall in? So that's like the official studies. In my own observation, my own thinking and analysis of this, is that, well, calling out to a creature is not naming it with a specific category and attributes and purpose. So, but if you start, like, if you have a cat and you name the cat, it means you're already entered into a relationship where you are the one who controls its food. You have the power to deny it its food. You have the power to train it. The same with a child. Like, by entering a domesticated mode, you get to possess the control of how and when and what and whether the other eats. So how do we escape that? Otherwise, there's no need to name a cat or a mouse. You can communicate with an animal in the wilderness without the need to name it, because, well, you can communicate like that. By naming it, maybe it becomes easier to represent it, and so to be alien, like to distance yourself. Okay, you know, if we don't have a language right now, for me to show you that I'm talking about a tree, I'll have to actually take you by the hand and take you to that tree, and we'll touch the tree and we'll eat the mangoes or whatever, and you know. But now I can tell you there are mango trees outside. I can even draw them. I can show you on the, like, oh, this desktop. You know, we can do away with all the trees and represent them on the desktop and open the computers like, wow, I have trees. So you see, like, I don't know, like how, you know, I love language. People feel it when I write, you know, but I also know, like, every time I'm trying to express something, there is so much contradiction, so much violence in language. My writing, people tell me, like, when we meet you face and face, you're such a sweet person. When we read you, it's like, oh my God, you know, you're going to bomb us all up. Like, well, I don't know. Maybe it's the language. I have no idea. So I don't know if it answers you.
I can follow up later, but...
Okay.
This man has...
Yes. How do we get commercial television and talk radio that is fully staged in Lawrence Kohlberg's sense of the 10 stages of ethical development, and in particular, how do we prevent misperception of U.S. activity in the United Nations?
What? I don't know. Maybe you could give a talk on that.
So there are two, I know Joby and someone else, right? Okay, so Joby and...
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say, earlier somebody asked about what are some things we can do. I grew up kind of unschooled, and I knew a family, for instance, like just to give an idea, I knew a family who they hadn't completely given up the idea that there's things that we need to teach our kids, but they did decide that they would never initiate any education until their kids were 13. Like, I mean, if their kid, every kid you know, we'll figure out that they want to know how to read when they're ready to, and then can learn really quickly. It doesn't take years. And I mean, that's just an idea of something to consider. And I bet you'd be surprised by the time your kids are 13, you know, the discussions you've had that they started.
Okay, yeah, I hear that a lot. You see, the problem with that is that the premise is that, okay, you know, and a lot of the homeschooling families, you ask them, like, why are you homeschooling the kids? Oh, so they grow up smarter. That eventually they'll start reading, they'll catch up, and actually they'll bypass everybody else. All those school kids, these will be the best, the winners. You see, but the premise is still that they're going to be the winners in this non-winning situation. So how do we deal with that? On the one hand, of course, you know, we all, regardless of the degree of our alienation, still, you know, what prompts us is still that we want the best for our kids, and that by educating them in whatever environment, we are going to transmit the skills that will help them live. Okay? But then, when you really analyze, like, what are the skills that we are transmitting within this domesticated mode that's taking us ultimately to the nuclear bomb, either with Iran or Israel or whoever, or who knows? Are we transmitting skills to live or skills to die? You know, it's taking back to my idea of this dressing and undressing, the shroud of death in which we all wrap ourselves and we dress ourselves in. Like, if this is the premise, then even if we unschool until the age of 13, well, maybe it's still healthier, because at least, you know, they're safe, that, you know, whichever they would have developed, they would have developed their own reactions to the world, whatever moral, ethical stance. But then all of a sudden we start imposing on them that from which we have liberated them. You see, that's a problem. I have no solution, because I cannot tell you, like, okay, you know, I don't know, like, how to do it. You know, don't teach your kids. Maybe they'll be upset when they grow up. I don't know. Maybe they'll thank us.
Well, I mean, part of my idea was, I bet most of us here, by the time we've done it for 13 years, it'll be a good habit. You might not find that there is anything that you feel like you have left to impose on your kids. I mean, I wasn't saying, I was just giving that as an example.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Again, you know, I don't know what the parents were teaching this by example, how these parents, like, often you find parents who would have loved to be a famous pianist, then, you know, unschools the kid because wants the kid to be a famous pianist. So you're still imposing, you know, a very rigid, like, you're not listening to what the kid, well, what if the kid wants to be a truck driver? What if the kid wants to go and live in the wild alone in the forest? Why not listen and support and give all your love to that kid, whatever the kid would choose? You see, like, that would be the problem. Like, you're still imposing a certain knowledge and expectation with that knowledge and category of, now you're growing up, that's your category, okay, you should be ready to do this and this and this, and what you're doing is still to promote somebody else's interests on behalf of civilization. Answers a bit?
You and then Keisha.
And my question will kind of follow up on this, so it'll work well, and I have another prefix to it. I was wondering if you could speak to your interaction with kind of your unschooling and your own lullaby to kind of the deschooling society, deschooling projects, and like even more formalized, like free school movements and modern school movements in Spain and over here, and how those kind of work with your own educational system.
I don't know much about, like, these schools except from, you know, just, you know, having been exposed, like, you know, read some John Hall's, you know, the Summerhill Project, a few others. I don't know. My own kid participates in Montreal in the free school, which is but then again it's because she chooses to go to some workshops and then she chooses to give workshops. It's something that, you know, it's completely comes from her. I mean, I don't know how these free schools, how free are they in the sense that it's the children who want to go there, or the parents find it convenient. And again, I understand that not everybody, like before maybe we used to have more of a community where kids would be growing together. I know that in this context, like, you know, I wouldn't be able to tell you like, no, don't ever leave your kid with strangers. I mean, I really truly believe you shouldn't leave your kids with strangers. But a lot of the people just find themselves like, yeah, we have to pay rent. I mean, I have a crisis every first of the month, but, you know, still have to pay the rent. So, which means you do have to give your time and your labor somewhere. Okay, we found a way where we never compromised, that we never really felt we had to abandon, except twice, once with a friend and once with a grandmother. We were moving. So we left her with a friend. When we didn't ask her, it wasn't because she wanted to, because it was convenient. Otherwise, we always accommodate that if the kid wants to, the kid will do it. If the kid doesn't, you know. Again, like the whole idea of schools, free or not free, are still set within a system that is not free. I know they try to work it out that, okay, you know, kids will follow their interests, but how much is it really driven by the kids' desire? Well, maybe they get used to it, maybe they make friends eventually. But, you know, really, like, you know, if you look deeper, like how free are they really? I mean, I don't know.
I have two questions that are somewhat unrelated. The first has to do with, for me, who is not a parent, but who is thinking about how to relate in the world in, I guess, and I haven't used this terminology before, but less domesticated way, the role of food, and how we relate to or use animals. That whether, you know, you're a parent or not a parent or whatever, like that is particularly in really radical circles, how and what and who we eat does not get critiqued or looked at in these conversations. So we worry about me being domesticated, and we worry about other human beings being domesticated, and maybe we worry about trees and polar bears being domesticated, but we never really examine the whole system that creates something that we don't need, that is a perpetual, violent, ongoing, brutal domestication that we have a choice about. I mean, language, we can make some moves, but maybe we don't have as many options. But food being one of the places where we practice liberation seems to me to be really important. So maybe that's not a question, it's a comment, and maybe you can speak to that. So, and then one other thing, from your experience, how I think one of the pressures for people who are interested in parenting in a different way, the biggest one is your relatives. Like, I think one of the reasons I'm not sure I want to have children is because I don't know if I can actually handle who I love them both. My mother-in-law and my mom freaking out about not having children's books or not buying electric toys. Like, I'm like, I'm not going to spare everybody and just not have offspring because I don't know that I can handle it. So, I mean, in your own experience, so those two things.
Okay. If I forget one of them, remind me. Okay, I'll start with the first one. It's really good you raised this point because, well, absolutely. Like the whole, the whole story of the fall starts with what? Like knowledge, but also what? It's about consumerism. It's consuming knowledge. I actually wrote a play about that. So and for me, it starts with food, and my interpretation is that symbolically Adam and Eve, who were gatherers and were told not to substitute knowledge, not to separate your true feelings, wholesome, holistic knowledge through separation and alienation. By consuming that which has not fallen, which was forbidden, it was as if they have created greed and impatience. So greed and impatience comes with the knowledge of alienation. And starting from that, so if you take that as a metaphor for agricultural society, starting from that, we can look at the whole agriculture, the whole civilization is about food. And it's about appropriating everything that could be food. Everything becomes, the purpose of everything is for our consumption. So how do we undo that? And with that, we domesticate, we lure people, children, animals. Like, think of grading system. How do we lure people, animals? By giving them, by denying them food, and then promising them that if they're good, if they do what they're told, what we want, they maybe will get, with permission, a little bit. Grades do exactly like that. Grades are about food, about denying the possibility. Not really, because, you know, if this is what amazes me, like, why are we domesticated so much? If all these hungry people just went out, stopped working, let everything just grow, there would be enough food. But they believe that they have to do everything that is being asked for them because they will get their paycheck. If they get good grades, one day they'll get a job and they will get that paycheck. You know? And so it goes on. How to undo that is basically how do you undo this whole knowledge of dependence, of categorization, that okay, because once you feel you're trapped, like it becomes and language transmits it to us as natural. Okay, human resources has any, like, it's not, like, I heard even anarchists say, like, talk about human resources. What's human resources? Is it resources for humans? Is it humans that are resources for some humans? Like, if you start looking at everything in these terms, then, well, we're consuming humans, we're consuming fish, we're consuming, and whatever we're not consuming can be destroyed, can be done away with, because we have our knowledge has no need for this. So yeah, the question is how to liberate ourselves from this, how to find our way back to that wilderness, to that garden, where, you know, we could just wait for the fruit to fall and not pick it from the tree. And the other question?
About sort of your relationship with relatives. Like, how, are they overly concerned? Do they try and do things behind your back? How have you survived that?
Okay, they'll execute me if they see this. It's okay. Some are worse than others. My own tactic was that when everybody, well, relations and friends knew that we're going to have a baby, of course, like, the first thing is, oh, what color pram? Oh, we're not going to have a pram, we're going to carry her. Oh, what color clothes? Like, oh, we're going to go naked, not nude. It's winter in Russia. I know, we'll figure out something. So I made it clear from the beginning that we are very picky about what you're going to give, and it's just going to go to the garbage. So you're just wasting your money. And still, we received some plastics, fantastics, whatever, and it all went to the garbage. And unfortunately, I had to hurt feelings, and feelings were hurt, and loudly. My side of the family is more open. My parents were actually, even themselves were, I have big issues with them, but, well, my father died, but with my mom, but still, both were really radically different from the mainstream. So, there's more communication there. The other side, yeah, they tricked her into eating meat. That was very bad. We talked about that. She wanted to try, they scared her that she would not grow. And we talked about that, and she's like, we took it as a learning experience, that how you face, and if you want it, it's your choice. But she doesn't, she understands the ramifications. So, we built on that. So it helps her deal with this stressful situation, but in her own way. In a school situation, she wouldn't have. And I have a friend who had really a really difficult time because she didn't want her kids to be put in school. Whatever family situation forced the situation that the kids ended up in school. And she even had a social worker on her back because she, apparently she was neglecting her kids. She wasn't feeding them milk and meat like other children. And it was a big thing. It was really, how do we deal with that? She ended up having to give in because otherwise the kids would have been taken away. So, I guess you just have to be really careful with who you marry and just hide your kids.
Actually, I have a comment that goes back to earlier about more about educating children, and I think it's important to remember, and this kind of goes to the naming thing as well, of naming of animals and all of that. It's important to realize that individual creatures, including children, have their own capacity to discover. I am not her mediator. I don't mediate between her and the world. She can encounter the world on her own. She's been given all the facilities for that. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to guide her and stand beside her and be there when she looks to me to make sure this is okay, or whatever, whatever that she needs, I'll be there to give her what she needs. But I'm not going to discover the world for her and then tell her about it. Because that causes what you're saying about distance. It causes her to be distant. It's not just, I don't distance myself from her only, but if I try to mediate between her and her own discovery of the world and life, then I distance her from life. And I think, talking about unschooling, it's important to realize that children do have that capacity, so that you don't always feel pressured to reveal things to them and explain things to them and tell them, well, this is the way it is. And they see it. They figure it out by watching it, by doing it. And I don't think that it's good to keep things, to not tell children. But, one question I've had for myself in thinking about educating my daughter is, I was homeschooled, and I was one of those where it was kind of the race to see how much better than everyone else I could be. How many more credit hours of schooling I could have on my diploma by the time I graduated. And I felt oppressed by that in a big way. It separated me from my family. It separated me from the desire to discover things. Because to me, discovery was a chore. And I don't want that to happen to her, but I also don't want her to not find out about things because I am afraid to educate her. So, for a second. You want and then speaking again to the naming, bringing up language, creatures have their own way of naming themselves, and whether that be a child or an animal or a tree or a river, I think empathizing in the sense that we can know our own experience, and I know as an adult human being, if someone came to me when I was trying to do something and they thought they knew better than me how to do what I was doing, and they took my hand and started moving it around and saying, well, you do this and you do this and you do that, and you know, put your hand over here and make it go like this. My immediate reaction would be, get away from me, don't touch me. I can do this myself. Or if you need to explain it to me, then you do it from over there, from your place, and I can choose yes or no, I don't want to listen to what you have to say, or it makes sense, I'll do it that way. And I think it's the same with naming. You know, I have a cat and a dog, and I call them names, but really, listening to you, I'm thinking about how that's totally unnecessary. The only thing that I use those names for is to refer to them when I'm talking about them to other people, which is, you know, that's a distance issue, or when I'm calling them, and they come to me because, you know, there's
Probably because they hear your voice.
Right, but they could hear my voice calling in a different way, and I'm not trying to say I have power over you. I'm the boss, you come over here and do what I say. And just, I think, realizing that naming is the opposite of listening.
And actually, on naming, there are anthropological studies, for example, in some gatherer and hunter societies, like for example the Inuits of Russia and North Scandinavia, they actually no, or Siberia, yeah, Siberia. They don't name the child until the child reaches a certain age, and the child can go out into the forest alone for a week and live there. And then the child comes back and knows the name. And the name doesn't have, it's not gender specific. It could have been a boy who comes back with a great-grandmother's name, or a girl who comes back with a famous hunter's name. And it's like, it's a name that exists there in the world, and that they know who they are. So in a way, maybe it's a comment also to to your comment. You know, if there is a possibility of naming without violence or alienation, maybe you know, I didn't think of it earlier, but maybe that would be one of the options. Maybe that would be less violent than imposing, you know, a name.
Yeah, and I don't like the naming is the opposite of listening. I'm not sure that that feels kind of black and white to me. Like, I mean, in the story that I'm thinking of, when God brings the animals to the human, and the human names that, what I was saying about naming was the word that we translate name in Hebrew is call. Like, that's why I said call out. Like, so, I mean, I'm not sure about the relationship between calling and naming, but
in this case, what the child decides who he or she is, for that, until that time it's an it, until decides what to be called.
Right, but
maybe that's just it.
But where I was going with that was that the animal, like, we don't know how much time the person had spent with the animals to know, or like to be like paying attention to what the animals, how the animals acted or whatever, to then call it something. So like maybe there was listening involved first, and then I mean, I don't know. I just it seems like we're not really willing to think about that.
You said it well. Who else?
Just like a comment on that, like in Navajo, the way that they do it is when you present yourself, you would never, when you present yourself in Navajo culture, you would never say, my name is, like as an identity restricting kind of thing. The translation is they call me. So it's like recognition